Hello everyone out there that's already joined and are listening. You should be able to see my screen now. For those of you that can hear me, if you can throw a hand up to make sure that you can see my screen, that would be appreciated to make sure we kick this thing off well. No screen share. All right, let me get this figured out here. All right, now we should have the screen showing. Awesome. Go ahead and get started here in just about 1 minute to make sure that we can let everyone attend who's planning on it. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking about warehouse reporting. We've got the slides up here in Knowledge already, and I'll show you guys how to find those. We come into Knowledge and we scroll down to Webinars. The title of today's is Encompass on Tap Warehouse Reporting. So right here. All right, and I'll continue working off of this PDF as a quick reminder for everyone that they're available in Knowledge. So we're covering warehouse reporting today. Specifically, we're going to look at the reports that are used for bin audit, pick productivity, inventory aging, inventory status report, and the report used for the WMS inventory write-off. All of the reports that we're looking at today can be found on the WMS reporting dashboard. This may not be a dashboard that a lot of people are using yet, but it is going to be the standard of where we come to find reports in the future. So under the report library, we can type in WMS, and this is where it takes us. It's possible this report is not shared out with the role, so we might need to show more dashboards. And under the report library, you should be able to pop over to WMS. If you're a user that the role is not shared with, but you have access to dashboards, you can find it from the dashboards table. And just look for the dashboard called WMS. All right. So the first dashboard in our list, or the first report in our list here, is the bin audit report. This report is an incredibly handy report. It's a little bit newer. It's been around for a bit, but not as long as some of the others. This report allows you to see the transaction history of a bin. We've got a link to it here on the WMS dashboard, and another place that people find it often is the bin inventories table. On the bin inventories table, this special audit button will take you right to that report. So if I click audit here, I see the bin audit report. Same thing that if we went to it from here. From here, we don't know which bin or product we're talking about, so we'd have to type that information in. So what we're seeing in this report is a list of all the transactions and how it affected our final inventory. So from 1/16 of 2020, we've only had one transaction for this product in this bin. And we can see the user Toby did a put away action of 10 units. This 10 units left us with a final inventory of 10 units. Let's look and find something that's had a little bit more action in there. All right. So in the bin H101B for this product, Modelo Especial, we can see all of the action that's happened. Since 1/16, we've only been picking out of that bin. And if we come down, we can see that we reduced the bin by 1. We picked 1 out of it, and that left us with 99. We picked another one. It left us with 98. Picked 2, left us with 96. And if we click on this action here, we'll be able to see the bin trans that created this. So we've got 2 buttons here. The arrow will show you the single transaction. So we know this was a -2 pick complete bin trans. So I can click the arrow and I see just that bin transaction. If I click on the word pick complete, this brings us to the bin trans table, and it gives us the best guess of the 2 transactions that were completed. So I've got the 2 that picked out of the bin, and that moved them into the staging bin. So if you're seeing a user move product into a bin, and you kind of want to know, hey, where did that stuff come from? This view should point you right to that. Now this view doesn't have a objective way of finding the exact 2. So really what we're filtering on is to make sure that it's the same product created by the same user with the same transaction type with timestamps that are right next to each other. So if you've got users hitting the same product, same type of moves and stuff like that within a minute of each other, you might see 4 bin trans or something like that. But this really should just kind of point you to those 2 that happened. So the bin audit report, kind of that gold standard for looking at a bin and saying, what's been happening. You can see inventory at a given day, at a given time, and you can also see pretty much all of the actions that have been happening for that bin. No questions on that one. We can move down to the next report that we're going to take a look at. The Pick Productivity Report. A little bit bigger of a report, but very exciting to talk about. Pick Productivity Report can be found right here on the WMS dashboard. This is pretty much the only place in the system that it can be found currently. The plans are to create more dashboards that have productivity numbers for the warehouse, but we are waiting to make sure that we publish that when it is as solid as possible so that we get that warm, fuzzy feeling that everyone gets to adopt this new kind of standard metric. Currently, there are a lot of places in the system that will show you pick productivity numbers, and we want to get all of those standardized around this report. So this report is looking at bin transactions and time clock events. While someone is picking, we create the time clock events to mark that. And for each of the picks that happened, they create bin transactions, and those show us the total cases. So in this report, we've got cases picked, and this is just all cases that were marked as pick completed by that user. The next two numbers that are going to be most important here are the hours. We've got pick hours and shift hours. The shift hours is simply the grand total time between the first touch of the system to the last touch of the system. It does not need to be a picking touch. Any person that logs in, whatever they do, we mark that as the beginning of their shift. And the shift ends after they've been inactive for a certain amount of time, and we'll go ahead and close it there, right? So just the total amount of time between the first and the last touch of the system. The picking time is really only a valid metric for those of us that have an electronic picking system like VoicePick, because that's the piece that's constantly pinging the system to let us know that the picker is still currently actively picking. For those picking off of paper, the shift hours metric is going to be more accurate. So as the user picks, each pick transaction extends a pick time, and that leads us to the total pick hours. The expectation would be that the pick hours are always less than the shift hours. And then the big metric that everyone's kind of looking for, that cases per pick hour or cases per shift hour, is simply the total cases divided by the time we see here. The downtime metric is simply just the shift time minus the pick time, right? So if we know that this user's first touch of the system to the last touch of the system had 3.8 hours and they spent 0.9 hours picking, well, that means they spent 2.9 hours not picking. The pallet count, this is the total number of pallets that the user picked. This is not full pallets, just different pallets in the system that were picked. The pick count is how many different pick transactions were created by this user. So this number is really helpful to understand the workload while they're picking. Total cases is a good metric. Cases per hour is a good metric. But both of those can get skewed by what you might call easier picks. Right? So if someone has to pick a full pallet, it's considerably easier than picking, one case at a time for that whole pallet. Well, if a user gets to pick the whole pallet and they get credit for 60 cases picked in almost no time, that would still only count as one pick count. Whereas someone picking 60 different products, 60 different cases, building a full pallet, they would get a 60 pick count. So the higher this number is, essentially the larger workload that user is taking on. One of the nice things about this report is that if no start date and end date is filled in, it will look at the current date. And it's the current date shifted by about 6 hours, meaning that once we cross midnight and it's 3 a.m., we're still going to be talking about the current day's shift, right? So if today is the 23rd, we start picking tonight, it's showing the 23rd, it's showing the 23rd, we get to midnight, it doesn't switch over and start showing the 24th, which we're not working on yet. It still continues to show the 23rd up until about 6 or 8 a.m. And then, of course, we can just kind of go back in time and pick a couple of weeks if we want to for those users and see kind of that full report. And if you're looking to take something like this and switch it over to more of a payroll style report where you want to know this user and all the different transactions they had for the week, you can click on column edit and just kind of switch the order between user and date, right? So if I put the user up into the parent and the shift date down to the child, now it makes it a lot easier to see what this one user did for that 2-week period, grand total of cases, and each of the days they picked. It'll be really easy to add more filters to this report if you want to filter on specific roles and things like that. But that's about all there is on the Pick Productivity Report. Nice and simple, kind of easy to understand. Moving on down the list here, we've got the Inventory Aging Report. This report tracks the age and shelf life of purchase transactions, right? So we can use the average daily sales to predict if purchase transactions are at risk for going out of date. So this is really handy for kind of that inventory management and kind of seeing if we're kind of behind the 8 ball on whether or not we're going to have a close dated problem coming up. This is a report that's been around for a long time under the Warehouse tab. We'll look at the old one here real quick. All right, so if we go to this Warehouse tab, we've got the Aging Report here. This report has been rebuilt, and the benefit there is we get new opportunities for features and new filters and whatnot. So we can access the new version right here from the WMS Reporting dashboard. We get pretty much all of the same filters as the original report. We're getting the min and max shelf life location filter, sales days to look at average daily sales, and all your product filters. So I'll go ahead and select a location and a brand, and we can go ahead and see the breakdown here. So the default view of this report will break it out by supplier, then by package code, so the kegs and the package products will be separated, and then by product. And then each product will have a line item for each of the different purchases that we have. The invoice number can be clicked on to view the purchase. We've got the date it was received, the expiration date, the total purchase quantity, how many the system expects us to still have on hand, the shelf life, average daily sales, and then our days of inventory. Right? So if we expect this inventory to last us 3 days, that means we should sell all of it before the 11-day shelf life wears out. The SL minus DOI, that's your shelf life minus the days of inventory, right? So the larger this number is, the more likely it is that we will be able to sell the product without having any issues. One thing to remember is that this is inventory based on purchase transactions. And we've got a couple of different ways of measuring this. So this is not warehouse inventory. This is not your bin inventory. Bin inventory is notoriously difficult to track which expiration date is exactly per which quantity. So the system is just going through in a FIFO manner and saying we're going to deplete this as the oldest product first. So as long as you're keeping proper rotation in the warehouse and selling the oldest first, all of this data will be pretty accurate. If you've got rotation issues in the warehouse and you know that you are not consistently selling the oldest product first, this data will be less reliable. So that's just something to remember. All right, the inventory status report, a juggernaut in the warehouse world. This is probably one of the most commonly run reports. It exists on the WMS dashboard, and it also exists under the warehouse tab. So we can just go ahead and put something in here to look at. And we can get this report to pull up. This is running a little slow for me here. Not sure why that is. All right. Took a little while. It finally came up. So, probably many of the people listening today have at least seen this report before. I believe probably the most commonly looked at number from this report is the available inventory number, right? So the available inventory number is what we've got currently on floor minus what we've pre-sold minus what we've allocated. If allocations aren't really a thing for you, you can drop it off of the report. The allocated only subtracts from the on floor if you're showing it in the report. Just a little quirk about this report that's good to kind of remember. So, kind of giving a breakdown of these fields from left to right. Let's kind of take a look at what these mean. These first four fields are kind of the same thing that you would get from the depletions report. And we'll probably have a focus here in the future of trying to make sure that the status report is the current right now status versus being able to see kind of historical inventory, right? Depletions report does historical inventory real well. Let the status report do the right now inventory. So if we set a start date, this would be the inventory on the start date, the same way the depletions report does it. This would be total purchased between the start date and now. This would be total invoiced between the start date and now. The difference between the invoices and the pending invoices, invoices are verified invoices, and the pending invoices is anything that we've considered sold but not yet verified. So those would be invoices on returned or balanced load sheets. Remember, as soon as that load sheet is returned and there's an invoice still on it, we consider that to be sold. We haven't locked it in yet, so it's not verified, but we still believe that it's been sold. Truck went out, truck came back, we checked it all in, everything checked out. So that is sold product, but we're not really going to commit it to that hard sale number yet in case it does change. The loaded. This is bin inventory information for the route type bins. So any of your LS bins or your route bins, this would be the current bin inventory for those products in those bins. The picked number is the bin inventory for your staging bin. So in the warehouse, when we pick something, it moves out of the bin that you picked it from into this staging bin. And it will sit here in this staging bin and show as picked on the status report up until the pallet or the load sheet gets loaded. Then this number would move into this number and it would be loaded. Delivered is essentially the list of invoices that have been locked on load sheets that are not yet returned. Unsellable inventory. This is inventory that we have in the warehouse. This is warehouse bin inventory information. But this inventory right here is set to not include in on-floor, right? We include product in on-floor so that we know we have it, that it's good and sellable, right? We own this product, it's ready to be sold. Unsellable is generally things like your adjustment bin. Adjustment bin or your breakage bin or your out-of-date bin. These are the areas where we have moved product because it is no longer good product for us. So we want to make sure that we don't include it in our on-floor inventory, and we're not quite ready to write it off yet, right? So this number is really only relevant to WMS users. Another thing where you can see unsellable and not have it necessarily bad product is your receiving bin. So some people prefer to have the receiving bin included on floor, and they say, if it hits our dock, we want to be able to sell it right away, get it out the door. Other people might say, hey, it might be sitting in the dock, but unless we slot it into the pick line, our operations team doesn't have a way to get this out the door. So don't start promising it to people when we haven't figured out how we're going to be picking it yet. So depends on how you're set up. It's really just controlled by that bin zone field, include an on-floor inventory. If it's false, we show it in unsellable. If it's true, we show it in on-floor. So that should give everyone a pretty clear idea of what the on-floor number means. These are all the bin inventories that are warehouse bin inventories that are set to include in on-floor equals true. Pre-sales are all the num units from invoice transactions that are positive num units on load sheets that are not yet loaded. So new status, locked for routing status, any of the positive units. So if you've got a swap for a customer and you've got a +1 and a -1, the pre-sale is not 0, the pre-sale is 1. And allocated comes from the allocations table. This is for these products, the number of units that are still allocated. Pretty simple report, not a whole lot of stuff to change on it, just a few different filters here. We will be offering a Fusion version of this report on the WMS dashboard soon, I believe. That'll give us the opportunity to have some more product filtering and things like that, where this older style report doesn't have the option to get new things added to it. So it'll be exciting to look forward to. Had a question here. Can the inventory status report be showed by supplier or product? Yes, I believe it can. This report is always going to break it out by supplier with the product over here, and then I believe if we did have more than one supplier, can see what that looks like. So you get your totals by supplier, but this report will always show by product also. The Fusion version that we'll be posting in the WMS dashboard would give you the opportunity to have more granular control over how we group these things, right? Similar to how we had the aging report where you could choose to group it by package code or different things like that, depending on what granularity you find important. All right, on to the last one that we'll be talking about today, WMS inventory write-off. So this report is available to non-WMS users. It is the inventory bins report, but the real special sauce about this report is that it is the one place in the system where inventory adjustments happen for WMS locations. This can be found on the WMS reporting dashboard. And it also exists under the warehouse tab. So we'll go ahead and look at this, and we'll look at a specific bin. This is generally how this report is used for inventory adjustments. This report used to have about kind of two different pieces of the functionality where you can see the start date and the end date, and see for a bin, for a product, kind of what those inventory changes have been. And I think since we've introduced that bin audit report, I think the bin audit report is a much more appealing way to consume that information, right? Because we can kind of see chronologically all the different transactions that have led us up to a specific number. Whereas this report would really just show you the total amount at a given time period and the total amount at the end period, right? So really right now, I think the best functionality that this report offers is the inventory adjustment. In the future, we do plan on moving that adjustment process into its own dashboard so that we could have greater flexibility on filters and things like that. So we're not just stuck with the functionality of this report to do the write-offs in WMS. So if we were doing a write-off, we can use this report. We focus on the bin that we are writing off product from. So in a WMS environment, the thought process is you count all of the real warehouse bins and you count them against an adjustment bin. So if I was going to go count bin A1, in the counting process, I would say whatever the difference is between what I'm counting and what the system thinks is there will get dumped over to this bin. And this bin will hold on to it until I either count it somewhere else and find it, or I've counted everything and I say, warehouse is correct, this adjustment number needs to go away for us. So if we're at that point where we've done our counts and everything in the adjustment bin needs to be written off, this is where we would come to. We can say, I want to look at the adjustment bin, show me all the products. And this is what we get. All the different products, the current inventory in there. A positive in the adjustment bin means we need to write that product off. A negative means we are going to write that product in. The process here is click the inventory write-off button. All this does is it takes us into the mode where we can select what we're writing off. Doesn't do anything just yet, so don't be worried about clicking on that. So after we click on that, we can see a few different options on the buttons up top. And the big difference is the checkboxes here. The checkboxes allow us to select what we will be writing off. And we can go through and check mark the things that we want to have written off. Then we can click on Generate Inventory Write-Off. And what this is going to ask you for is a date, a route, a customer. because, again, the only thing that ever changes inventory in Encompass is a purchase or an invoice. So the end goal here is to create an invoice and pull that stuff out of the bin. So we need a date for the load sheet, what route to put it on, and the customer that this will be written off to. So we would pick something like inventory adjustment Sterling. And from that page, when you click the generate write-off, that would create the load sheet and the invoice, and everything would be written off. The real special sauce about this report is that when you invoice that write-off, the pick complete transactions that deplete your warehouse bins will come out of this bin. In a non-warehouse environment, you can create a write-off just by adding an invoice and saying, I'm going to sell 5 cases that appear to be missing to my inventory adjustment customer. They come out of your warehouse, no big deal, write-off is done. In a WMS environment, we've got very strict product location definitions, right? In these bins, we know exactly what the inventory is. So if we just created an invoice and said, I want to sell 5 cases to adjustment, the warehouse would go through that standard process of, if we're selling cases, they need to be picked, tell us what bin they're going to come out of, and that would all go through pick rules. And the pick rules are most likely going to pull it out of your pick bin, which is probably not where the adjustment needs to happen, right? We push all of the errors into the adjustment bin, so when we do the write-off, we want the errors to come out of the adjustment bin. So that's that kind of big piece of what makes this part of it important, is that when we do that write-off, the only bin that's affected for bin inventory is the adjustment bin that you're writing off. That is the last report that we have on the list today to cover. This dashboard for WMS reporting, we are going to continue to fill this thing out with reports that we think are helpful. So if there is a generic sort of concept that you are looking for to be able to kind of understand what's happening in your warehouse, please reach out to us, and we can work on creating this kind of generic viewpoint that everyone can use to understand these types of reporting metrics. For customized reports, for things like creating pick productivity so that you can pay commissions or things like that, the professional services team is still the best place to get customized reports built. So the generic stuff we will be working on creating and publishing so that we've got quality metrics for ourselves. Customized things, go to the services team. All right, that's all I have for you today. I'll stay online here for just about another minute or two to check for questions, and then we'll be signing off here. Question, is the returns by route report live? It is live. This was created when this dashboard was initially launched, not by me. I don't particularly like the way that it's set up, which is why I didn't cover it today. I did seek to make a new one for this webinar today, but as I was creating it, it was really slow as I was testing it, so it needed some more work before I was able to publish it. So the current functionality on this to look at returns by route just shows the route number and the total per reason, right? So that's kind of nice to be able to look through and see total quantities by route and kind of see what's happening on that route. But this report, I think, is missing a date range and anything that would allow us to kind of see some more specific detail. I'll give you kind of a sneak preview if you're interested in the report that I would like to put on this dashboard for the returns by route. This is my version of it here. So pick our location. Let's go to Sterling, and we'll look at things that were returned on the 21st. And this is the report that worked well on Pioneer as we were testing it. And then when I took it to a few other sites and tried testing it, it was really slow. So I'm going to have to do some more testing and figure out what we can do to make it faster. but I really like kind of what I had going on here. So it shows us the route, and we can filter on that up here if we want to, but because I don't know the routes that well, I just let it run wide open. And we show the reasons. So under empty keg, we had two different products returned, the 6-barrel empties and the half-barrel empties. And the return action was we returned it to the dunnage bin. Under mispicks, we had these products, and the return action was returned to adjustment sterling, right? So kind of showing the same data that the other one showed. It's showing you the route and the different reasons and quantities, but we're also getting the product breakdown, and we're kind of scrubbing that return rule to give the user an indication of what really happened in the system with that return, right? Did it go back into the warehouse? Did it go back to a pick bin? Did we write it off? I don't really know, right? I don't know the return rules. So this field, the plan for that is to say, just look at the return rule and say, give the user an idea of what we would have done to that product, right? Did we return it to the warehouse, a specific bin? Was there an adjustment? And that kind of stuff, right? So I like the functionality of this. Couple of things to remember, though, is that this is a return date, not a load sheet date, right? When you do the count-ins, all we really know is that you're doing the route reconciliation on this date. So it could have, you could be doing the return action on a Tuesday for a Monday load sheet, but all we really know from the return data is the route and the date you did it. So this is the report that I believe we will switch to, because I think it offers more helpful information than this one currently does. But again, it was running pretty slow, so I think I'm going to have to refactor it and do some more testing before I can publish it. But hopefully maybe by the end of next week we can have this thing published. The depletions report, we can look at this report very quickly. The reason why I wanted to leave it off of the WMS, the warehouse reporting piece of it, is that while it does fall under the warehouse tab for depletions, pretty much the users that do depletion reporting are almost exclusively accountants, right? I don't think I've ever met an actual warehouse person that looks at depletion data. So we can take a look at that one real quick. And this is the older one, but we can still look at that. And generally you run this for a 1-month period. So the depletions report rolls us back in time, and it'll show us what our inventory would have been on at this starting date, and what the inventory is on the end date, and then other transactions in between that got us there. So for this product, on 12/1, we would have had 88 cases in inventory. In the light blue column header, we've got purchase data. And the purchase data is broken out into standard purchases and transfer purchases. And we look at the positive numbers and the negative numbers, right? Positive numbers, negative numbers. We take purchases and split them into positive and negatives because negatives happen much more rarely on purchases. And generally, if we're actually shipping something back to a supplier, it's a good enough indicator that something's going on that we want to keep our eye on. So we saw 560 added into inventory, right? Plus on purchases. Purchases increase our inventory, so that 560 is an increase. And then we get over to the invoices section. The invoices decrease our inventory, and we've got 3 different types of invoices versus the 2 different types of purchases. We've got the transfer out invoices, standard sale invoices, and adjustment invoices. Right? This is controlled by the customer account type on the customer type records. We don't split these ones out into positive and negatives, right? Whereas these ones we do. So from 88, we added 560. We took out 392 in normal sales. We took out another 1 in adjustments, and that left us with 255 on the final inventory. The WMS dashboard also has this report. In the new Fusion format, right? So we're getting some really nice benefits by having that in Fusion because there were particularly some things in accounting that people really wanted to be able to run this report by that the old depletions report didn't have, right? So specifically being able to filter on state package code, state tax code, distributor state license number, and being able to see the report broken out by those same things, right? State tax code, state package code, distributor state license number, and stuff like that. So again, when you're looking at these Fusion versions of it, remember that the column edit is your friend here to see different values. We start out this report from Fusion just defaulting to grouping by supplier. But if you needed to, you can include the product data, or you could scrap the supplier data altogether and give something that the state might be more interested in, something like a state package code, or group the whole thing by the state tax code. And we're doing the exact same logic for this report as we would do with the old depletions report. Right, so we're getting the starting inventory, we're doing the receipts, the returns, transfer in, transfer out, invoice transfers, sales, and adjustments, right? And you get to your ending inventory. I think there's a lot of breakdown here, and one of the ways that you can run this report is also by splitting out all the granular details. And looking at just increases from purchases and decreases from sales. But after talking to some of the accountants on this, it did seem like the numbers that they were interested in were the granular details, so we left the default view same as the classic one was, having it all split out. But if you wanted that kind of quicker summation of what happened, you can come in here and say beginning inventory, total purchased, total sold, left us with this. All right, so that's all I've got of the depletions report. I appreciate the questions for some more of these things. We do anticipate trying to get more things in here. Again, for any of those kind of metrics where you're just kind of hoping to get better visibility into your warehouse, reach out to me, talk to me. We'll try and get something built and kind of standardize it and publish it out here for all users. The returns by route, the one person that was asking about that one says the newer version looks better. I agree. So we'll be looking to switch that one soon. If anyone out there has been using the returns by route report and likes the current format, feel free to reach out to me or just save a copy for yourself so you don't have to come back to the dashboard to find it, because this one should be changing to that kind of more granular breakdown. All right, well, if there's no more questions, I'll be signing off now, and everyone have a wonderful end to the rest of your week. Thanks for joining.